My name is Morgan, 35 years old, and if you ever assumed the toilet paper industry was just for squishy tenderfeet, Jamie and I, we inherited an empire of necessity from our folks. Beneath but above all, they also left us a legacy which today we are committed to developing. In one of America's vibrant urban centers, I operate our flagship operation, and Jamie runs another branch a city or so over. We are a pair, no doubt. However, miles and obligations hold us in another situation on maximum days. But when Jamie comes round, we don't just discuss numbers and projections. Then we pause and wonder at the beginning of it as well, where our mamas watch down on us praying that they too are pleased with what from above is occurring. The branch was ticking over happily with me in charge, and my number 2 Ryan to back me up. Ryan is one of those almost mythical creatures, not just because he gets the job done, but he also gets me. His grin. Morgan, this concept is gonna take us to the moon. Me with, well, let's not start measuring ourselves for rings just yet. We were in tune, taking it to the edge and breaking shit. ANTER, /fresh-faced and keen as mustard, technically our new sales director. But that man was all in their head, for he could talk them into believing the sky were full of shit and yen, not blue. Soon, his professional charm crossed over into personal territory, and he went all the way in on me. Morgan, we are not only creating ripples here. Tsunamis. Maybe this should be a permanent partnership. His eyes met mine and did not waver, a touch of defiance in his voice. Thinking he was joking, I laughed. Blake, you never fail to shock us. Running for president next, that's what. Yeah, all right, he said with that cocky smile. We're dynamite together. The point we have should not be lost. It was a very weird offer, but I was used to being the one taking those kinds of chances. Well, I said with an uptick in my voice after realizing how ridiculous it all sounded out loud. What have we got here, Blake? In many ways, that handshake solidified not only our collective fate, but it was a sort of second act for the company as well. We got a huge sprawling house. You know the kind, like those palaces in magazines where people fold themselves into spaces to take pictures, and we were folding ourselves onto our corners. Our days were long, filled with love and the labor of one seeking greatness. A room full of luxury around us. Things were great, better than I ever dreamed they could be. 1 year inside of our whirlwind life, and then the news dropped on us, unexpected. I was expecting. I was over the moon, bursting with some form of joy you only read about in books and never really understand until it hits. The plan, or lack thereof, Blake, being the master strategist that he has presented a new plan. Cam, listen, this kid has more than earned all of you. Why do not you just for a bit step back from the hustle? His words hit me sideways. Step back and do what, Blake? Don't just sit around talking to my belly. He smirked, the smooth one. Not just that. For the MVP he will be preparing, it's temporary. I'll tell you all about it, I swear. I think the way he said it made me give in right then. Fine, but do not turn my branch into a circus. I was half joking, though mostly serious. While Blake literally picked up the reins in this branch that day, I was fully committing to pregnancy. We had some bumps along the way, though. The clinics felt like my second home, and every visit was nerve-wracking. After a grueling 6 months, mobility started to get difficult. It was like a marathon effort even for simple things. The rest of me except my body wasn't mine anymore. I was slow as a snail, but I said, guess it's just me and you, kiddo, slapping my belly, becoming more used to this slower stride of life. It only got worse for Blake, but his hours, so crazy. The nights at the office became habitual, his voice on the other line forever tired. Babe, It's slammed here. Another all-nighter might be needed. Concern still lingered, but Blake just had a way of not worrying. Don't you stress, Cam. It all for us / this shit is so confusing. That future you know what? To hell with them. Do you and the baby. But I desperately wanted to be wrong. But each don't wait up tore something small, and I stirred in the night wondering if this was how it went. But when I sat alone in that too big, too quiet house night after bleak winter night and the loneliness penetrated my flesh till it ached, eerie sounds of unfamiliar tappity taps and koshti coughs, I dialed him up to hear fixed words flowing from his practiced lips. Blake, this is not so simple 5 minutes. Seems like I am in this alone. He was quick to soothe. Doing what has to be done, Cam. Honestly, it WILALBEWORTHIT. We three, we're the cats who will melt all your cream. This was a little reassuring but also not, and I hung up feeling comforted, yet disturbed at the same time. The balm to my worries resting softly in Blake's words, though deep down things of a change struck quietly on the misty breeze, with an eerie sort of whisper that maybe it wouldn't always be WE traveling this path together. That's what I was doing one day when the doorbell rang. I slowly made my way to the door and opened it, revealing a very somber Jamie. Hey Jamie, what brings us here today with a sweet breeze of wind? Trying not to sound surprised, I said hello. Needed to see you, Cam. April 2019 time. Midday location Lincoln, Nebraska. Psalm sat the phone rang. Psalm's attention snapped from his Bible to the ringtone pulsing on our cell phones. Got this guy on my door proclaiming that he had deacon. We've got an issue. What? I recognized the look on his face. It was that something more than family time catch-up time thing. We were snuggled on the sofa, and he was sitting across from me all stiff like a rod. Spit it out then. What's up? It's the business, Cam. The numbers are looking grim. What's going on over there? In his human voice, with that steel edge he only used when it really mattered. Rubbing my seemingly restless belly, I sighed. Blake's been handling things. He said it's all good. Good, Cam. It's far from good. Asterisk sales decrease. Orderly delivery. Where's he been all this time? Jamie was getting red in the face, gesturing with his hands. I felt a pang of worry. He's managing it, he says to me. He's overseeing the recruiting, signed big contracts. #circle meeting. himself.twitter.com/ViewerJCSI5D. Jamie leaned in, locking eyes with mine. I stopped her quick. Hey listen, I know you love the kid and all, but Blake's up to something. We need to dig into this. You cannot just sit idle and watch it. All right, I'll talk to him. Oh, but you know how he is, always smoothing it over, I replied, and the weight of my world grew. Alison sit up, at the end that has to part with. Do not let this smooth talker, Cam. We cannot let everything go down to the drain, as of, whatever this is. He was already out the door before I could even say goodbye. That evening, dinner was like a chess game. Or point, he was on restaurant turf as usual. Blake beamed and regaled us with office tidbits, while I, on the other hand, was storm brewing thanks to what Jamie had dropped on me earlier. Nice and smooth company, bahut acha chal rahahai bakhe. I tried, but I much more prodded at my food than ate it. Income steady, no hiccups. Blake had hardly looked at anything but his sirloin. Yeah, all good. Smooth sailing, you know? We entered our name into the competition for best executives in this city. We're killing it, babe. And he had the nerve of being somewhat confident, a cold slap in our faces. Really? Right, I miraculously choked out, my voice more parched than toast. My doubts were doing somersaults. I heard Jamie's words repeating in my head, giving a whole other meaning to them. Afterward, while Blake was singing in the shower, I picked up my phone and called Ryan, one of my ex-deputies. My heart was beating so loudly the ringtone became muffled. Ryan, it's me, I said as soon as he answered. I need the real scoop. The office, how is things going there? For a split second, long enough for me to regret dialing. Then Ryan's voice, hesitant. "Morgan, you really have to see it. It's not. It's complicated." "Complicated how?" I pushed. The frustration was seeping through. Ryan was a vault, unlocked slightly to tell me enter. Getting out of bed was literally like trying to strip away from my own shadow, thick and choking with sadness. It was a day, but not just another one. It had inscribed in it that resolution of this mess I'd been pulled into through my office meeting issue. I poured coffee into a cup in my hands, but they trembled and the black liquid was like somber thoughts bubbling away. "Morning, love." Blake's voice was too loud for the silence of our kitchen. Too cheerful, too self-absorbed. My heart was pounding against my chest like a drum, and I forced a smile. "Morning. Busy day ahead." "Always. It becomes bigger and bigger." Whirlwind, high-stakes readers. That full of shit attitude spread his chest, so he looked like a rooster in a henhouse. I nodded, my brewing storm safely hidden underneath that facade of calm. When Blake got off work, I waited for him to leave the house before getting into my car. The drive to work was a blur, my hands death-gripping the steering wheel. The closer I came, the more reality hit me. This was it, the moment of truth. Ryan stood nearby, the lines of his gravity pulled tension more pronounced on his face. He greeted Morgan as if the walls were listening in, a low whisper. I so nodded and led me to my office. She felt like an intruder in a foreign, sterile room. "It's bad, Morgan. Simi worse," he stated, moving them around like a crooked card dealer. As our team dug into the data, what was truly a disaster revealed itself. Blake's been creative in the accounting, and his team, my god, a bunch of cronies with no idea what actually goes on here. Ryan's voice was thick with disgust, fucking bleeding us dry. I felt the anger boiling in, like a Vesuvius waiting to pop. And the contracts. "Please tell me we have not blown the Ryanson account." Silence of Ryan was an answer louder than any words. Ryan dropped the biggest bombshell of all, one that hurt me to my core as we continued down this path with revelations about what state is your company. "Blake's never here, Morgan. The bastard. In fact, he ain't here now." His voice was angry and disbelieving. When I found out about that, it honestly floored me. Anxious, I pulled out my cell and dialed Blake. His voice echoed in the speaker after a couple of rings. "Hey, babe, what's up? Where are you?" I inquired, calm on the outside while a storm was brewing within. "Drowning at the office. Where else would I be?" He sounded casual, too casual. I hung up and looked to Ryan, my determination solidified. We play it smart until we determine our play. Ryan nodded, realizing the seriousness of what he was getting at. "What's the plan, boss?" I drew in a deep breath and my brain began whirring with more purpose. Step 1. Lock in our contracts. I will contact the buyers and ask for some delays where required. We need to buy some time. A few days of restless night and worry had hardened into a resolve that these early morning fog were trying to shake. The demons that had seeded in my business and life were now finally going to have a spotlight on them. I was meeting the PI I hired, someone Ryan suggested. Incognito, I walked into a coffee shop whose anonymity speaks secrets as the barista deals with grinds of dark brew. The PI, tough-looking guy with eyes that were all business, pushed a manila envelope towards me. His voice was a gravelly, cigarette and whiskey sound. "Everything you asked for is in there." My hand lingered over the envelope, and implored, needing the words to be said. "More times than one, he's been a cheating fuck," the PI added with no sympathy in his tone. "Your husband has been playing house with a co-worker. I have pictures and everything." And I felt this less than a millisecond before my heart sank, anger and betrayal mixed with an odd sense of vindication swirling in me. I thought as much, but I tried very hard to be wrong. "Show me," I demanded, my voice far sturdier than it should have been. He spread the pictures like a deck of cards, each one killing me emotionally. And there she was, laughter, touch and divide moments could have been mine, only one of our own employees, Blake. I repressed the urge to cry, to shout, and I let that rage fuel me instead. What else? I demanded, refusing to look away from the damning proof. They have been studiously careful, if inadequate. Even your husband has been siphoning company money. It seems they may have been on a little romantic retreat that the PI embarrassedly had to tell us. That was the last straw. Blake was using my business and our family's legacy as nothing more than a petty cash cow to fund his frolics. Thanks, I replied, pushing the envelope back to me. With my mind running again, I paid way more than needed for the coffee. I sat in my car and allowed myself to cry for one single moment of weakness where I could finally grieve the life that never was mine. After the tears stopped, determination replaced them. Blake and his hoe had fucked up the wrong person. I would be their new plaything, just a thing they maybe could improve to perfection. They were wrong. I called Ryan, so serene and glacial. You must also call a meeting of the TAM tomorrow afternoon. You are all required to be there, no exceptions. As always, Ryan, my solid and foundation neutral, queried not. Consider it done, Morgan. My thoughts were a blur like the drive home, devising plans. It wasn't simply revenge. It was about justice, making all the wrongs that had been committed against me and my company right. When I got home, Blake greeted me with a smile without noticing the storm in my chest. Hey, babe, long day. I mustered a smile, acting out the role one final time. You could say that. Dinner smells great. We ate mostly in silence instead. He spoke of his day, and I nodded back to him as if my life were a script. I was plotting, I guess for the whole time my mind was somewhere else. The cold glow of the fluorescence in the conference room prevailed over us. I was at the front, papers in hand, belly pregnant as all fuck to illustrate just how goddamn much I had on this particular line. With the help from Ryan, my loyal deputy, I had orchestrated this vital agenda. The room was overflowing with employees, and in the midst of them all sat Blake alongside his homewrecker of a mistress wearing their best imitation doe eyes. Cut the bullshit, I said, keeping my voice calm even though there was a fucking war in me. This has been a record-breaking loss under Blake's watch. This has affected our bottom line because those are contracts to which we have made commitments with key partners. I pressed the remote and the graphs on screen told an ugly story. 7 straight months of descent. Blake squirmed under my look, head on. This means that the drastic is necessary. With immediate effect, I am firing all of those who have led us to this decline. The room was quiet, my words settling in. I followed up, with Blake, we let you go for cause, mismanagement and egregious breach of trust. I jerked my head in the direction of his mistress. You for continued truancy and complicity in this disaster, as well as boffing my husband. Suddenly, whispers filled the room as the mistress left in disgrace, with her bags packed and escaped, for all knew she was found out. His face crumpled to an uncomfortable level of red before Blake slowly, but surely rose. Morgan, you can't do this. Think before you act. His plea was met with a cold glare from me. Blake, I have pondered this long and hard. It is the only way to save that future, for this company and for our daughter. When the meeting concluded, staff members came to me, visibly and almost audibly exhaling their relief. We're behind you, Morgan. We are glad to have you back, they said, and I took solace in their backing support, my nerves only a little less tight. As I was exiting the room, Blake made a move to trap me. Morgan, for the love of *name *ITIV, can't CNWETLK. We can fix it. Blake, we are setting up the easy out. Your decisions but that, I said, handing him a sealed envelope from the armrest of my chair, filled with signed divorce papers. With shaking hands, he accepted the envelope that only now did it dawn on him was more than just a piece of mail, watching his every move. But Morgan, No, Blake, it's over. Go now, I said in what my teachers would have termed an iron will. The dust settled, the air cleared, and before lay ruin. My refuge, the company, has faced our ruthless storm, but it was time for resurgence only to bring what happened back. The next morning when I entered the office, it was with a new step, one of confident resolve. Ryan was waiting when we arrived, an arsenal of paper unfurled across the war room. Heiner looked up as I came in and nodded knowingly at me. "Morning, Morgan. Ready to start fresh?" In fact, Ryan's voice was both a pep talk and heavy with the work facing everyone. I threw my bag onto the street and started rolling up his sleeves of my jacket. "Let's get to it. We have a mountain to climb." Number one was clearing up damage. Those close to bailing on us themselves. I led, earnest in my tone yet apologetic with eyes that seemed hopeful. "Listen, I know we've really dropped the ball here, but rest assured that whilst it's taken a little while, this time I'm back in the saddle and ready to put things right." This was me on my phone addressing our biggest customer at Thompson, no relation, just two lucky owners of awesome surnames. And of course he was hesitant. "Morgan, your shop is a shadow of itself." "Yes, I do, and I'm not trying to excuse myself. I'm here to offer solutions. Let us show you that we are still the company you loved and trusted." He sighed almost an eternity later. "All right, Morgan, we'll give you one more shot. Don't let us down." The conversations walked on a tightrope, one by one, negotiations and reassurances ready to tip over at the smallest miscalculation. After that, it was always a celebration to retain each client, soothing the still open wounds of betrayal. Ryan and I then began our conversation with the team. The room was quieter now, lacking a background buzz of productivity. Now, the few employees that were left felt confused and uncertain of their fate. "You all have been through a lot," I said to the gathered team, my voice echoing in the mostly empty office. He'd been tied up, gagged and hung, dangling from the gently swaying tree above us. "But I can tell you this, we will rise stronger than ever." A murmur of assent swept the room with a spark is something like hope igniting in their gazes. "We are all in this together, back to basics and focusing on what made us great," I told them, each looking into their eyes. The team banded together, the mission reborn. We threw ourselves into work, days blurring into nights as we navigated our path towards security and prosperity. The moment my baby boy Jesse was born, he instantly became everything. We came to the conclusion that working from home was us best, sustainable, balancing taking care of a newborn and steering my company back on track. My rock in all this chaos, Jamie also began to make more and more appearances. Not just for work anymore, but something about him being there was clearly doing us good. "And sis, you are not alone. We're a team, remember?" At the threshold of my door, grocery bag in one hand and toys for Jesse in other, he'd remind me every time. The clean-cut divorce from Blake, which was long overdue. The court not only awarded me the divorce, but they also nailed Blake on his cheating. He had to pay back every penny he stole from the company for all suffering his actions caused. "I'm sorry, Morgan. Please, I beg you to give me another chance since," he begged, trying anything that would work. But my mind was made up. Jesse needs a hero, not an adulterous bitch for his mom, I said before exiting out of that chapter in my book. Besides Samantha being there for me in the beginning after Lid was born, and I learned how to properly hold her with the help from Nanny. With half days, I could spend my mornings with Jesse and the second part of my day working. It gave me a peace and focus that I had not experienced in some time. Building the trust is much more difficult than you could ever imagine. I learned that the hard way. "Ryan, we are getting our ship in shape," I declared over another of the many video calls to my deputy. "I am done with blind faith. Any decision that needed a go-ahead, and it came before me. Clear as crystal, Morgan." Ryan always found a way to be supportive, one hand holding the other in his since unwavering loyalty and sturdiness. The company wasn't only afloat, it was doing better in ways I had not thought attainable after such betrayal. It was a time of shifting seasons, and soon the next chapter in my life. Where he once felt like the walls were closing in around him, was now a utopia of serenity and growth. What was now making the rounds at the water cooler wasn't stock or mergers, but karma. Mistress of my ex-husband, cast off, abandoned, divorced, cautionary tale for karma. His phone vibrated a few times, Blake calling him for days on end the toll, and Pattern making his name appear occasionally on screen in flashing red make or break fonts, as doubtless he was begging to be one of many last chances. After a few tries, my conviction only gathered in its momentum so much as that it all ended with me hitting block for the very last time and cut off the past entirely. And Jesse, his vibrant laugh and limitless energy lightened up my apartment so completely that I could no longer see any of the darkness left over from those turbulent years. Every day with him was as if he gave me a gift, took me on an adventure, and created the future filled of love, good values for us to grow from each hardship. Jamie began to come over more frequently, and with every visit his presence alone not only reminded us of the bond we had, but validated it, because despite all the fires our relationship has been through, what was forged from that fire burned strong. Pitoa Jamie became as regular a visitor. "You're doing amazing, sis." He patted Jesse on the head. "You're a fortunate guy to have him," and that ebullient giggle in response. "Doing well, aren't we, pal?" And I would answer, my heart so full your baby seemed God tier. The business wasn't merely surviving, it was thriving. Jamie and Ryan by my side, we overcame those obstacles with fire in our bellies, making lemons into lemonade. So I sat there in the quiet of night with my son beside me and whispered a promise into that darkness, a vow to keep on going forward, one day at a time. Everything was overwhelming now, but everything also had joy where before it did not, and reminded myself never lose courage nor foresight to let go ever again.
I stared at Delia's newborn cradled in her arms, an overwhelming sense of disbelief washing over me. My eyes darted between the tiny bundle and the man standing beside her. Greg, my husband of 7 years. "What's going on?" I choked out, unable to process the sight before me. Delia, my supposed best friend since college, looked up at me with an expression I didn't recognize. "Leela, I should have told you sooner," she began, her voice laced with guilt. "Greg and I, we're together. This is our child." The words hit me like a ton of bricks, stealing my breath away. My mind raced back to our carefree days at university, when Delia and I were inseparable. We'd shared every secret, every triumph and heartbreak. How could she betray me like this? Greg shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet my gaze. "Lila, I'm sorry. It just happened." "It just happened," I echoed, fury rapidly replacing the initial shock. "You've been sleeping with my best friend behind my back, and that's all you have to say?" Delia flinched, clutching the baby closer. "We never meant to hurt you, Lila. Things just got complicated." Complicated didn't begin to cover it. My marriage, my friendships, my entire world, all crumbling before my eyes. I thought back to the past year, Greg's frequent business trips and late nights at the office. The signs were there, but I'd been too blind to see them. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. Greg sighed heavily. "About a year. A year. 12 months of lies and deception right under my nose. I felt sick to my stomach. Delia reached out to me, her eyes pleading. "Lila, please try to understand." "Understand?" I cut her off, recoiling from her touch. "How can I possibly understand this? You've betrayed me in the worst way imaginable." Greg stepped forward, his expression a mix of guilt and defiance. "It's not that simple, Lila. Delia and I, we love each other." His words felt like a slap in the face. "Love? You don't know the meaning of the word." I spun on my heel, unable to bear the sight of them any longer. "Don't worry, you won't have to explain yourselves. I'm done." As I stormed out of the hospital room, the weight of their betrayal threatened to crush me. But beneath the pain and anger, a newfound resolve took root. They would pay for this. I would make sure of it. The drive home passed in a blur, a torrent of emotions raging within me. Delia's betrayal stung deeper than I could have imagined, her selfish actions shattering the bond we once shared. But it was Greg's deceit that cut me to the core. The man I'd vowed to spend my life with had obliterated that promise without a second thought. As I pulled into the driveway, I steeled myself, forcing a mask of calm over my features. Greg couldn't know the depths of my knowledge, not yet. I needed to play along, to gather the evidence that would bring their twisted game crashing down. The front door swung open, and there he stood, a bemused expression on his face. "Everything okay? You look shaken up." I mustered a tight smile, willing my voice steady. "Yeah, just a long day at the hospital visiting Delia." The lies slipped off my tongue with surprising ease. "You know how exhausting she can be." Greg chuckled, seemingly oblivious to the maelstrom raging within me. "That's our Delia, always one for drama." He pulled me into an embrace, and I fought the urge to recoil from his touch. Over the next few days, I watched him like a hawk, scrutinizing his every move for signs of his deception. The little things I'd once overlooked now glared at me. The lingering scent of an unfamiliar perfume, the furtive glances at his phone, the late nights working. How could I have been so blind? Determined to unravel the truth, I made a call to an old friend, a private investigator I'd known since college. Within hours, he had Greg's movements under surveillance, tracking his comings and goings with meticulous detail. The evidence trickled in slowly at first, receipts for expensive dinners, hotel charges on our joint credit card. But then the floodgates opened and a clearer picture emerged. Delia had been siphoning money from our accounts for months, funneling it into a hidden slush fund. Plane tickets, jewelry, even a down payment on a cozy little bungalow, all purchased with our hard-earned savings, all part of their twisted plan. With each new revelation, my fury burned hotter, an inferno of rage threatening to consume me. But I kept my cool, maintaining the facade of marital bliss while secretly plotting my revenge. Then, one fateful day, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. A copy of a prenatal agreement between Greg and Delia, outlining their intentions to raise the child together, at my expense. I clutched the damning document, my hands trembling. They'd played me for a fool, using my love and trust as weapons against me. But no more. It was time to strike back, to expose their web of lies and make them face the consequences of their actions. As I looked up, my gaze fell on Greg, laughing and chatting with friends like nothing was amiss. A cruel smile tugged at my lips. Oh, how the tables were about to turn. With the prenatal agreement in hand, I finally had the smoking gun I needed. Greg and Delia's deception was laid bare, their treacherous plot exposed in black and white. But the document was just the tip of the iceberg. My investigation had unearthed a trail of lies that ran deeper than I could have imagined. Greg's suspicious behavior only escalated in the following days, his absences growing longer and more frequent. I'd catch him poring over financial statements late into the night, his brow furrowed with worry. Little did he know, I was one step ahead, meticulously cataloging every cent he and Delia had siphoned from our accounts. The numbers were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled into offshore accounts and untraceable investments. It was clear they'd been planning this for years, methodically bleeding me dry while I remained obliviously in love. Through it all, I maintained my facade of normalcy, playing the doting wife while quietly gathering the arsenal that would bring them to their knees. But even as the evidence mounted, a part of me still struggled to comprehend the depths of their betrayal. How could Delia, my oldest friend, the woman who'd once sworn to be my maid of honor, do this to me? We'd shared everything, from our deepest secrets to our wildest dreams. Yet she'd cast it all aside without a second thought, seduced by the promise of wealth and a twisted sense of entitlement. And Greg? The man I'd vowed to love and cherish, the father I'd hoped to raise children with. His lies cut deepest of all, a vile violation of the sacred trust between husband and wife. I'd given him everything, and he'd repaid me with deceit and betrayal. As the days ticked by, my resentment festered, fueled by each new revelation. I pored over the evidence, committing every sordid detail to memory. The fake business trips, the clandestine rendezvous, the countless nights they'd lain together while I remained blissfully unaware. Through it all, I remained an island of calm on the surface, even as a storm of rage raged within me. Greg grew increasingly distant, his guilt and paranoia driving a wedge between us. But I played along, biding my time until the perfect moment to strike. That moment came in the form of a family gathering, a celebration of my sister-in-law's promotion at work. It was the ideal stage, a chance to expose their duplicity before the very people they'd hoped to deceive. As the invitations went out, I couldn't help but smile at the delicious irony. They thought they were attending a joyous occasion, blissfully unaware that it would be the scene of their downfall. Little did they know, the game was up, and I held all the cards. With each passing day my anticipation grew, a heady mix of dread and exhilaration coursing through my veins. Soon they would face the consequences of their actions, their lies laid bare before the world, and I would be the one to deliver the final crushing blow. As the days ticked down to the fateful family gathering, I found an unexpected ally in my quest for retribution. Greg's own sister, Jenna. It turned out she'd harbored suspicions about her brother's fidelity for years, her intuition picking up on the subtle signs I'd been too naive to see. "I always knew there was something off about him," she confided in me over coffee one afternoon. "The late nights, the shady business deals, it all reeked of a man with something to hide." I nodded grimly, sliding the damning prenatal agreement across the table. Jenna's eyes widened as she scanned the document, her expression morphing from shock to fury. "That bastard," she hissed, slamming her fist on the table. "How could he do this to you, Lila? To our family?" In that moment, I saw a kindred spirit in Jenna, a woman wronged by the same man, her trust betrayed by blood. Without hesitation, I laid out the full scope of Greg and Delia's deception, every sordid detail I'd uncovered through my investigation. Jenna listened in stunned silence, her anger growing with each revelation. By the time I finished, she was trembling with rage, her knuckles white from gripping the table's edge. "We have to make them pay," she growled, her eyes blazing with determination. "They can't be allowed to get away with this." I nodded, a grim smile tugging at my lips. "That's exactly what I intend to do." Over the next few days, Jenna and I became co-conspirators, meticulously plotting our revenge. We pored over the evidence, strategizing the perfect moment and method to expose Greg and Delia's duplicity. "The family gathering is our best shot," Jenna mused, tapping her pen against the stack of incriminating documents. "We can't let them wriggle out of this one." "Agreed," I replied, my voice steely with resolve. "They need to face the consequences of their actions in front of everyone they've betrayed." As the event drew nearer, our plans solidified. We would let Greg and Delia bask in the illusion of normalcy, lulling them into a false sense of security. Then, at the height of the celebration, we would drop our bombshell, unleashing the full weight of their deception before the entire family. "They'll have nowhere to run," Jenna murmured, a predatory glint in her eye. "No more lies, no more secrets, just the ugly truth laid bare for all to see." With each passing day, my anticipation grew, fueled by the knowledge that retribution was finally within reach. Greg and Delia had made a grave mistake in underestimating me, and their arrogance would be their undoing. As the hours ticked down, I found myself dwelling on Delia's betrayal, the sting of her deceit cutting deeper than I could have imagined. We'd been more than friends. We'd been sisters, bound by an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of youth. Yet she'd cast it all aside without a second thought, seduced by the promise of wealth and a twisted sense of entitlement. Her actions spoke of a darkness within, a bottomless well of greed and manipulation that knew no bounds. With each new revelation about her past misdeeds, my disgust grew. The friendships she'd sabotaged, the lives she'd callously upended in pursuit of her own desires. She was a viper in human skin, striking without remorse or regret. But soon her venomous ways would be laid bare, her toxic influence forever purged from my life. Jenna and I would see to that, our righteous fury burning hotter with every treacherous detail we uncovered. As the appointed day dawned, a sense of grim determination settled over me. It was time to stop playing the victim and take control of my own destiny. Greg and Delia had made their bed, and now they would lie in it, their web of lies unraveled before the very people they'd sought to deceive. No more games, no more deception. Only the cold, hard truth and the consequences they so richly deserved. The days leading up to the family gathering were a flurry of activity as Jenna and I meticulously prepared for our grand reveal. Every detail had to be perfect, from the staging of the evidence to the timing of our dramatic entrance. "We can't leave anything to chance," Jenna muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration as she arranged the damning documents in a precise order. "One misstep, and they'll try to wriggle their way out of this mess." I nodded grimly, my jaw set with determination. "They won't get that chance." We'll have them dead to rights, with nowhere to run. As the appointed day drew nearer, a strange dichotomy took hold within me. On the surface, I maintained a facade of normalcy, going about my daily routine as if nothing were amiss. But beneath that veneer, a storm of emotions raged. Anger, betrayal, and a burning desire for justice. Greg remained oblivious to the gathering storm, his guilt and paranoia driving him deeper into a spiral of deception. I watched him with a mixture of pity and disgust, marveling at the depths to which he had sunk. "How could you do this to me, Greg?" I asked one night, my voice laced with venom. "To our family?" He froze, his eyes wide with fear and guilt. For a moment, I thought he might finally come clean, to confess his sins and beg for forgiveness. But then, like a cornered animal, he lashed out, his words dripping with vitriol. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he spat, his fists clenched at his sides. "You think you're so innocent, but you're just as guilty as the rest of us." His words stung, but I refused to let him see my pain. Instead, I met his gaze with a steely resolve, my voice low and dangerous. "Keep telling yourself that, Greg. But know this, the truth always comes out in the end, no matter how hard you try to bury it." As the days ticked down, the tension in our household became palpable, a thick fog of mistrust and resentment that hung heavy in the air. Greg grew increasingly distant, his guilt driving a wedge between us that seemed insurmountable. But through it all, Jenna and I remained steadfast, our resolve hardening with each passing hour. We were warriors on a mission, armed with the weapons of truth and justice, and nothing would deter us from our path. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived, and we put the final touches on our plan. The stage was set, the evidence meticulously arranged, and the guest list carefully curated to ensure maximum impact. As the guests began to arrive, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of excitement mingled with trepidation. This was it. The moment we'd been building towards, the culmination of weeks of planning and preparation. Greg and Delia arrived fashionably late, as always, their smug expressions a clear indication that they had no idea what was in store for them. As they mingled with the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and basking in the illusion of normalcy, I caught Jenna's eye from across the room. She gave me a subtle nod, her expression grim and determined. It was time. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, the weight of the evidence heavy in my hands. All eyes turned towards me, a hush falling over the room as I cleared my throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady and unwavering. "But I'm afraid this isn't the celebration you were led to believe." Greg's brow furrowed in confusion, but before he could speak, I pressed on. "No, this is something far more important, a reckoning, if you will. This is a chance to shed light on the lies and deception that have been festering in our midst for far too long." Jenna stepped forward, her expression steely as she brandished the stack of documents. "Greg and Delia, you have been caught red-handed," she announced, her voice ringing out in the stunned silence. "Your betrayal, your greed, your utter disregard for the people who loved you. It all ends here today." As the truth began to unfold, a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, eyes widened in shock and disbelief. But I pressed on, unflinching, laying bare every sordid detail of their duplicity. The stolen money, the secret rendezvous, the twisted prenatal agreement. Nothing was left uncovered, no stone unturned in our pursuit of justice. With each new revelation, Greg and Delia's faces drained of color, their smug expressions replaced by ones of abject horror. And when it was over, when the last damning piece of evidence had been presented, a deafening silence hung in the air. All eyes turned towards the disgraced couple, their guilt laid bare for all to see. In that moment, I felt a sense of vindication wash over me, a righteous fury that burned brighter than any flame. They had made their choices, and now they would face the consequences, the scorn and condemnation of the very people they had sought to deceive. As Greg opened his mouth to speak, to offer some feeble excuse or desperate plea for forgiveness, I held up my hand, silencing him with a single defiant gesture. "Save your breath," I said, my voice laced with icy contempt. "The time for lies is over. You've dug your graves, and now you'll lie in them." With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving them to face the music they had so richly earned. The game was over, the battle won, and justice, at long last, had been served. The moment the truth spilled forth, A hush descended over the room, the weight of Greg and Delia's betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Stunned faces turned towards the disgraced couple, eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Greg was the first to break the silence, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and desperation. "Leila, you can't be serious. This is all just a big misunderstanding." I fixed him with a withering glare, my voice dripping with contempt. "Save it, Greg. The evidence speaks for itself. Your lies, your deceit, your utter disregard for me and our family. It's all right here, laid bare for everyone to see." Delia stepped forward, her face contorted with a mixture of fear and defiance. "You're making a huge mistake, Leila," she hissed, her eyes narrowed to slits. "Greg and I love each other. We were going to come clean, to start a new life together." A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I shook my head in disbelief. "Is that what you tell yourself at night, Delia? That this was all some grand love affair, some romantic notion of destiny?" I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. "Let me clear the air for you. This was nothing more than a calculated scheme, a vile plot to bleed me dry and leave me with nothing. And the worst part? You used our friendship, our bond, as a weapon against me." Jenna stepped forward, her expression one of barely contained fury as she brandished a sheaf of documents. "Don't even try to deny it, you two. We have it all right here. The money trails, the secret accounts, the twisted prenatal agreement." As she began to recite the sordid details of their deception, Greg and Delia's faces paled, the realization of their exposure setting in. Murmurs of outrage rippled through the crowd, hands flying to cover gasps of shock and horror. "You see?" I said, my voice ringing out over the din. "This was never about love or destiny or any of that fairy tale garbage. It was about greed, pure and simple, a despicable act of betrayal perpetrated by two people who claimed to care about me." Greg opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Don't bother with excuses or apologies, Greg. They'll fall on deaf ears. You made your bed, and now you get to lie in it." Turning to face the stunned guests, I took a deep, steadying breath. I know this is a lot to take in, believe me, but the truth had to come out, no matter how ugly or painful it might be. Greg and Delia have been living a lie, spinning a web of deception that ensnared us all. "But no more," Jenna chimed in, her voice resolute. "Their games end here, their lies exposed for all to see. It's time for them to face the consequences of their actions." As the weight of our words sank in, a palpable shift occurred in the room. The initial shock and disbelief gave way to outrage, fingers pointed and voices raised in condemnation. Greg and Delia shrank back, their facade of confidence crumbling in the face of such overwhelming censure. But just when I thought their humiliation was complete, one final twist emerged, a revelation that not even I could have anticipated. "You know, Leila," Delia said, her voice laced with a newfound bravado, "you're only seeing part of the picture here." My brow furrowed as I regarded her warily. "What are you talking about?" A cruel smile twisted her lips as she beckoned Greg closer. "Go on, darling. Tell them the real reason you got involved with me in the first place." Greg hesitated, his eyes darting around the room, before finally letting out a defeated sigh. "The truth is, Delia never really loved me. This was all just a long con, a way for her to get her hands on our money." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as the full weight of his words sank in. Delia, emboldened by Greg's confession, tossed her head back and laughed, a cold, mocking sound that sent chills down my spine. "That's right," she crowed, her eyes glittering with malice. "Greg was just a means to an end, a useful idiot to be bled dry until there was nothing left. And once I had what I wanted, I was going to leave his sorry ass in the dust." The room erupted in a cacophony of outrage, voices raised in a clamor of fury and condemnation. But through it all, Delia remained unrepentant, her expression one of smug satisfaction. As for Greg, he simply hung his head in shame, the full weight of his betrayal and stupidity crashing down upon him. In that moment, I felt a fleeting pang of pity for the man I had once loved, a weak, pathetic creature who had allowed himself to be so thoroughly manipulated and deceived. But that pity was quickly overshadowed by a sense of grim vindication. Delia's true nature had been laid bare for all to see, her veneer of charm and innocence stripped away to reveal the cold, calculating monster beneath. As the chaos swirled around us, I caught Jenna's eye, a silent understanding passing between us. Our mission had been accomplished, and then some. Not only had we exposed Greg and Delia's lies, but we had uncovered an even deeper layer of depravity. With a small nod, we turned and walked away, leaving the disgraced pair to face the music they had so richly earned. The battle was won, the truth laid bare, and in the end, justice had prevailed. In the aftermath of the explosive revelation, a deafening silence descended over the room, broken only by the occasional murmur of disbelief or outraged whisper. All eyes were fixed on Greg and Delia, the once smug couple reduced to cowering, disgraced shells of their former selves. I stepped forward, my voice ringing out loud and clear. Well, there you have it, folks, the truth in all its ugly glory. Greg and Delia, the lying, cheating, manipulative scum who thought they could play us all for fools. Delia opened her mouth, no doubt to spew forth another torrent of excuses or justifications, but I silenced her with a sharp gesture. Save your breath, Delia. Your words are as hollow and meaningless as your supposed love for Greg. You've been exposed for the vile, greedy snake that you truly are. Greg flinched as if struck, his face a mask of shame and regret. Lila, please. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just lost. Weak. Delia took advantage of me, preyed on my vulnerabilities. A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I shook my head in disgust. Don't even try to play the victim card, Greg. You made your choices, and now you get to live with the consequences. Turning to face the stunned guests, I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what was to come. Friends, family, I know this is a lot to take in. Believe me, I understand the shock, the outrage, the sense of betrayal you're all feeling right now. But this is the reality we face. 2 people we trusted, 2 people we loved, have revealed themselves to be nothing more than manipulative, selfish liars. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, punctuated by nods and muttered curses directed at the disgraced pair. And now, it falls to us to decide what comes next. Do we forgive them, turn a blind eye to their transgressions, and allow them to slink back into our lives, our trust forever shattered? Or do we stand tall, united in our resolve to see justice done? I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in before continuing. As for me, the choice is clear. Greg, you are no longer my husband, not in any way that matters. Our marriage, our vows, our entire life together, it was all built on a foundation of lies and deception, and I will not abide by that any longer. Greg opened his mouth to protest, but I silenced him with a withering glare. No, Greg, you don't get to speak, not anymore. Your words have lost all meaning, all power over me. From this day forward, I am severing all ties with you, legal, financial, emotional. You are dead to me, a ghost from a past I'm ready to leave behind. Turning to Delia, I felt a fresh wave of fury wash over me, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. And you vile manipulative serpent, you wormed your way into my life, exploited my trust and friendship for your own twisted gain. You are the embodiment of everything I despise, greed, selfishness, utter disregard for the harm you cause others. Delia recoiled as if struck, her eyes wide with fear and indignation, but I pressed on, undeterred. Mark my words, Delia, I will see you pay for what you've done. Every cent you've stolen, every life you've ruined in your quest for wealth and power, it will all come crashing down around you. The legal system may be blind, but I will make sure it sees the truth, the full extent of your depravity. A hush fell over the room as the gravity of my words sank in. Greg and Delia stood frozen, their faces pale and drawn, the weight of their sins finally bearing down upon them. So you see, there is no forgiveness here, no second chances. You've made your beds, and now you get to lie in them, surrounded by the wreckage of your lies and betrayals. With a final, contemptuous glance at the disgraced pair, I turned and walked away, my head held high. The battle was over, the war won. And in the end, justice would be served, no matter the cost. The fallout from the grand revelation was swift and uncompromising. Within days, the divorce papers had been filed, my lawyers moving with ruthless efficiency to extricate me from the cesspool of lies that had been my marriage to Greg. He won't know what hit him, my attorney assured me, a predatory glint in her eye as she outlined the legal onslaught we had planned. We're going to bleed him dry, just like he and that snake Delia tried to do to you. I nodded, my jaw set with grim determination. Good. I want him ruined, financially, socially, in every way imaginable. He doesn't get to walk away from this unscathed. True to her word, my legal team went for the jugular, meticulously documenting every cent Greg and Delia had siphoned from our accounts, every asset they'd acquired through their web of deceit. The paper trail was damning, a laundry list of fraud and financial malfeasance that would make even the most hardened criminal blush. As the case gained momentum, more and more of Delia's past misdeeds came to light, a veritable trail of broken friendships, ruined lives, and shattered trust in her wake. It seemed she'd been running her long con for years, preying on the naive and vulnerable with a ruthless, single-minded focus. With each new revelation, my disgust for the woman I'd once called my best friend deepened. How could I have been so blind, so utterly taken in by her lies and manipulations? The signs had all been there, but I'd chosen to ignore them, blinded by my own desperate desire to believe in the sanctity of our friendship. But no more. The scales had fallen from my eyes, and I saw Delia for the vile, heartless creature she truly was. And as the lawsuits and criminal charges piled up against her, I felt a savage sense of satisfaction, knowing that her reign of terror was finally coming to an end. Greg, for his part, tried every trick in the book to wriggle out of the legal noose tightening around his neck. He begged, he pleaded, he even tried to shift the blame onto Delia, painting himself as the helpless victim of her machinations. "You have to believe me, Leela," he implored during one particularly heated courtroom confrontation. "I was just a pawn in her game, a means to an end. I never meant to hurt you like this." I fixed him with a withering glare, my voice laced with icy contempt. "Save your breath, Greg. Your lies and excuses mean nothing to me now. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." As the legal battles raged on, my life slowly began to regain a sense of normalcy. The cloud of deception and betrayal that had hung over me for so long was finally starting to lift, replaced by a newfound sense of clarity and purpose. I threw myself into my work, pouring all my pain and anger into my writing. The words flowed like never before, each sentence a cathartic release, a purging of the toxicity that had plagued me for far too long. And as the dust settled and the legal battles reached their inevitable conclusion, I found myself standing triumphant amidst the wreckage of Greg and Delia's lies. They had been well and truly vanquished, their ill-gotten gains stripped away, their reputations in tatters. Greg was a shell of his former self, his once charming veneer stripped away to reveal the weak, cowardly man beneath. Delia, too, had been brought low, her arrogance and swagger replaced by the haunted look of a woman who had finally been made to face the consequences of her actions. As for me, I stood tall and unbroken, my resolve tempered by the fires of adversity. The pain and betrayal I had endured would forever leave their scars, but they had also made me stronger, more resilient than I ever could have imagined. With the legal battles behind me and my financial future secure, I turned my attention to the next chapter of my life. The world was my oyster, a blank canvas upon which I could paint the vibrant hues of my own destiny. I quit my job, said goodbye to the stifling confines of the office, and embarked on a new path, one of self-discovery, growth, and the pursuit of my true passions. I traveled, I explored, I immersed myself in the rich tapestry of life that had been denied to me for far too long. And through it all, I found myself surrounded by a newfound sense of freedom and joy, unburdened by the weight of lies and betrayal that had once threatened to crush me. My friends and family rallied around me, their love and support a constant reminder that true strength lies not in weathering the storm alone, but in embracing the unbreakable bonds of those who truly care. As I stood on the precipice of this new beginning, I couldn't help but reflect on the long, arduous journey that had brought me to this point. The pain, the heartbreak, the searing betrayal, it had all been a crucible, a test of my mettle and my resolve. And in the end, I had emerged victorious, tempered by the fires of adversity, but never consumed by them. Greg and Delia's lies had once threatened to break me, but instead they had forged me into something stronger, something unbreakable. With a contented smile, I turned my face towards the rising sun, basking in the warmth of a new day, a new life. The shadows of the past had been banished, and the future stretched out before me, ripe with boundless possibility. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was truly free. free to chase my dreams, to embrace my passions, and to forge my own destiny on my own terms. The game was over, the battle won, and the spoils belonged to me alone.